At Thanksgiving dinner, my dad tossed an old watch box across the table and said, "Take Grandpa's junk, it matches your value." My brother laughed before I even opened it. I took it to a watchmaker the next morning. He lifted the back cover once, then looked up and asked, "Did your family know this was inside?" The watch box hit the table between the cranberry sauce and the sweet potato casserole. It slid across the tablecloth and stopped against my water glass. Brown leather. Cracked at the hinge, the kind of box that had been opened and closed 10,000 times by hands that knew its weight without thinking. Grandpa Cecil's box. The one he kept on his dresser next to a photo of Grandma Iris and a glass dish of butterscotch candies that were always stale. My father leaned back in his chair at the head of the Thanksgiving table and folded his arms. Leroy Holbrook, 62 years old, retired Georgia Power lineman, the kind of man who measures everyone in the room against himself and finishes first every time. "Take Grandpa's junk," he told me. "It matches your value, Thea." My daughter Cleo was sitting next to me, 7 years old. Her fork was in her mashed potatoes and her eyes were on the box, and she did not understand what was happening, but she understood the tone. Children always understand the tone before they understand the words. My brother Vince laughed, not after I opened the box. Before, he laughed before I touched it. His wife Tamara looked at her plate. Mom kept her hands in her lap and her eyes on the centerpiece. Uncle Harris, Dad's brother, stopped chewing. Vince laughed because he already knew what was inside. That is the part that mattered later. He did not laugh at the punchline. He laughed at the setup, which means he had been briefed. "You spend your life sorting through dead people's leftovers and putting price tags on grief," Dad continued. He was not finished. He was never finished when the room was quiet enough to hold his voice. "You are the leftovers now. Vince has a real career. You have a garage sale business and a daughter who thinks a folding table in a church parking lot is a store. That watch is the most you will ever inherit from this family because I made sure of it." He delivered that sentence with my 7-year-old daughter 4 feet from him, in front of his wife, in front of his brother, in front of his other son's wife. A folding table in a church parking lot is a store. He reduced my daughter's entire understanding of my work to a punchline about card tables and used lamps and the leftovers of people who are no longer alive to defend what they owned. Uncle Harris set his fork down. He did not pick it up again. Tamara adjusted her napkin. Vince was still smiling. Mom was still looking at the centerpiece like the flowers might open and swallow her into a world where this conversation was not happening. I picked up the box. I did not open it. I could feel the weight of what was inside. Not heavy, but present. The weight of something that had been worn every day for 40 years by a man who sat with me on his lake cabin porch every Sunday for the last 2 years of his life while nobody else in this family visited him. Cleo's hand found my arm under the table. Small fingers, warm grip. She did not look at me. She looked at her mashed potatoes. But her hand was on my arm, and it stayed there. I almost opened the box at the table, almost unlatched the hinge and held up whatever was inside and asked my father to tell me exactly what it was worth in front of everyone. But Cleo's grip tightened on my arm, and the room was full of people who had already decided what the box contained, and I was not going to give them the satisfaction of watching me discover it on their terms. "Thank you," I told him. My voice was level. I stood up. I picked up Cleo's coat from the back of her chair. "Let us go, sweetheart." Cleo slid off her chair without being asked. She took my hand. We walked out through the front door and down the porch steps and across the gravel driveway to my truck. The box was in my other hand. Dad's voice followed us through the screen door. Something about being dramatic. Something about ruining Thanksgiving. I did not turn around. The truck cab was cold. November in central Georgia is not freezing, but the vinyl was stiff and the steering wheel was chilled, and Cleo climbed into her booster seat and buckled herself in the way she does when she knows we are leaving somewhere we will not be coming back to soon. She clicked the chest clip with both thumbs. She has been doing her own buckle since she was 5. She is careful about things that hold her in place. Mama, her voice was small but steady. What is in the box? Grandpa Cecil's watch. The one he wore every day? Yes. Is it junk? I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Her face was open and honest, and her brown eyes held the same quiet that Cecil's eyes held when he listened to something he took seriously. She was asking because she did not have the vocabulary yet to ask what she really wanted to know, which was, is what Daddy Leroy said about us true? Are we the leftovers? Is a folding table what we are? No, baby, it is not junk, and neither are we. She nodded. She looked out the window at the dark pines passing. She did not ask anything else, but she reached forward and put her hand on the watch box that was sitting on the center console between us, and she left it there for the rest of the drive, 7 years old. Her hand on a dead man's watch box, holding it in place the way she holds everything in place, carefully and without being asked. If you are watching this, and you have ever been handed something your family called worthless while your child watched, you are in the right place. Welcome to Family Secret Tales. Friday morning, the day after Thanksgiving. Cleo was at her father's house in Savannah for the weekend. The shop was closed. I sat at my kitchen table with the watch box open in front of me and the overhead light on and my reading glasses pushed up on my forehead. The watch was beautiful. Even under kitchen fluorescent, it was beautiful. Gold case, leather band cracked and dark with decades of sweat and wear. The crystal was scratched but intact. The second hand ticked with the steady rhythm of a movement that had been wound and rewound 10,000 mornings by a man who believed that punctuality was a form of respect. I run Holbrook Estate Services. I coordinate and manage estate sales for families of the deceased. I appraise household contents. I price antiques, sort china, catalog jewelry, and turn rooms full of grief into organized inventories that allow families to move forward. I have handled over 300 estate sales in 11 years. I know the difference between a $12 Timex and a $14,000 Omega, and the watch in my hand was not a Timex. I picked up my phone and called Bess Milligan. Bess was 65, retired estate auctioneer. She had trained me in the business when I was 24 and could not tell a Depression-era glass from a Dollar Tree tumbler. She had taught me the rule that shaped my entire career: everything has a second value. Find the one the family does not see. I need you to look at something, I told her. Cecil's watch? How did you know? Bess paused. Because I appraised his tool collection 10 years ago, and he showed me that watch and asked me not to mention it to anyone in the family. He told me it was worth more than it looked. He said the right person would figure it out at the right time. I held the watch up to the kitchen light. The case back had a subtle seam I had not noticed before. The weight was wrong for costume jewelry. Too heavy. Too balanced. Bess, I think this might be something real. Call Aldo Kresh. He is the only person in Milledgeville who can tell you exactly what you are holding. Aldo's shop was on Wayne Street, 3 blocks from the courthouse, a narrow storefront between a barber and a bail bondsman. The window display had 8 watches arranged on black velvet and a hand-lettered sign that read Kresh Horological since 1973. Aldo Kresh was 72. He had been fixing watches since he was 19. His hands were steady, and his magnifying loupe was older than I was, and he spoke the way his watches moved, with precision and without wasted motion. I set the watch on his workbench. He picked it up, turned it over in his palm, held it under his bench lamp and tilted the case to catch the light at different angles. His eyebrows moved once, a small lift, the kind that a man who has seen 10,000 watches gives to the ones that matter. Omega Seamaster DeVille, he confirmed. caliber .565 automatic movement, 1968 production, gold case, original crystal, scratched but intact. He turned it over again and weighed it in his hand. In this condition, with my service, this is an $18,500 watch. Without service, $14,000 at auction. My father called it junk. Aldo looked at me over his loupe. His expression did not change, but his eyes held on mine for 2 extra seconds. Your father was incorrect. He picked up a thin case knife and pressed the back cover release. The case back popped free with a quiet click. He turned it over to examine the movement and clean the rotor. And then he stopped. His tool hand froze mid-air. His loupe eye widened. He set the case back down under the lamp and angled the light carefully, the way a man angles light when he has found something that does not belong in a watch compartment. A small piece of paper, folded twice, was pressed flat between the movement and the cover. Beside it, taped to the paper with a strip of clear adhesive that had yellowed with age, was a small brass key, the kind that opens a bank safety deposit box. Aldo unfolded the paper, a number in Cecil's handwriting, 1141. Below it, First Citizens Bank, Milledgeville, GA. Then he turned the case back over and held it under the lamp. There is an engraving on the inside of the cover, he said quietly. His voice had dropped. He turned it so I could read it. For Thea, you always listened. Cecil's handwriting, engraved into the inside of a watch cover that nobody in my family had bothered to open because nobody in my family thought the watch was worth the effort. Aldo set the case back on the felt mat. He looked up at me. Did your family know this was inside? No, my throat tightened. The shop was quiet except for the ticking of the 8 watches in the window display and the sound of my own breathing. They thought it was junk. My father threw it across a dinner table to make a point about my value. Aldo nodded once. He picked up the brass key and held it out to me. Your grandfather did not throw it. He placed it. I almost called my father from Aldo's shop, almost dialed his number and let the appraisal figure do the talking. But the key was in my palm, and the box number was on the paper, and the engraving said my name, and whatever was in that safety deposit box was meant for me and nobody else. So I put the watch on my wrist. Aldo adjusted the band with a small tool, his hands as steady as the caliber .565 movement ticking against my skin. And I drove to Bess's house. If you have ever found out your family threw away something worth more than they understood, subscribe to Family Secret Tales and hit the bell. The safety deposit box is next. Saturday morning. First Citizens Bank, Milledgeville branch. Bess drove, because my hands had not stopped trembling since Aldo's shop. I sat in the passenger seat with the Omega on my left wrist and the brass key in my jacket pocket and my right hand flat on my knee pressing down to keep the fingers still. The bank was quiet. Saturday morning hours. One teller. The branch manager was a woman named Thea who recognized the box number immediately because Cecil had been a customer for 41 years and had visited his safety deposit box exactly once a year, every January, to add or check the contents. He came in every January, Thea told us, always alone, always early. He would stay in the viewing room for about 20 minutes. He never told us what was in the box. He was very private about it. She pulled box 1141. It required 2 keys, the bank's master and the small brass one from inside the watch. The locks turned together. The box slid out. It was heavier than I expected. Inside, a manila folder, thick, sealed with a rubber band that had dried and cracked. Bess and I sat in the private viewing room. I opened the folder. The first document was a deed. Property deed for 4 acres and a residential structure on Lake Sinclair, Baldwin County, Georgia, built 1974. Titled to Cecil Raymond Holbrook. No transfer recorded. No sale. No lien. No power of attorney. The lake cabin. The one where Cecil and I had sat on the porch every Sunday for the last 2 years of his life. The one where he taught me to identify pine warblers by their trill and showed me how to tie a blood knot for fly fishing, even though neither of us ever fly fished. The one Dad told us 5 years ago he had sold to cover Grandpa's medical bills. The one Mom confirmed. The one Vince nodded along to. Gone, they told us. Eaten by hospital bills and nursing costs. It was never sold. It was never transferred. It was sitting in a safety deposit box behind a key that was taped inside a watch that my father called junk. The second document was a Vanguard brokerage statement. Account ending 7714. Balance, $94,000 in a total stock market index fund. Named beneficiary, Thea Marie Holbrook. Transfer on death designation. No secondary beneficiary. No contingent beneficiary. Just my name. The third document was a letter, handwritten, Cecil's block print. The same slightly slanted capital letters he used on every birthday card he ever sent me, and on the label of every jam jar he canned in the cabin kitchen. Bess read it aloud because my hands were shaking too hard to hold the paper flat. Her voice was steady, but I could see her jaw working between sentences. Your father will tell you the cabin was sold. It was not. Your father will say I had nothing left. I had this. You are the only one who sat with me on that porch. You are the only one who noticed when I stopped eating. This is yours. Everything in this box is yours. Do not let them tell you what you are worth. I already decided. Love, Cecil, I sat in that bank viewing room for a long time after Bess finished reading. The fluorescent light buzzed. The watch ticked against my wrist. The deed and the letter and the brokerage statement sat on the table in front of me like 3 pieces of a puzzle that had been cut apart 5 years ago and hidden where only one person would find them. Bess put her hand on mine. She did not say anything. She held it there until my breathing steadied. Then she pulled out her phone. I am running a title search from the county records portal right now. She typed for 3 minutes. Then she turned the screen toward me. Clean title. Cecil Raymond Holbrook. No sale recorded. No transfer. No power of attorney filed. The cabin is still in his estate. Dad had lied. For 5 years. To everyone in the family, the cabin was never sold. The medical bills did not eat everything. Cecil had $94,000 in Vanguard that nobody knew about because nobody bothered to sit with him on that porch long enough to earn his trust. Monday morning. I drove to Lake Sinclair. The road from Milledgeville took 22 minutes through Pine Flats and past 2 Baptist churches and a gas station that still sold boiled peanuts from a crock pot on the counter. Cecil used to stop there every Sunday morning and buy a bag and eat them on the cabin porch, dropping the shells into a coffee can that sat between our rocking chairs. The cabin appeared at the end of the gravel road through the pines. The same gravel Cecil's tan pickup had rolled down every morning. The front porch had 2 rocking chairs. One was Cecil's, the seat worn smooth by decades of sitting. The other was mine, the one I had dragged from the back porch so I could sit next to him during those last 2 years. The lake was silver through the trees. The air smelled like mud and pine and the particular stillness of a place that has been loved and then left alone. I almost sat down in Cecil's chair right there. Almost let the morning and the porch and the quiet pull me into the same Sunday rhythm I had known for 2 years. But the dock was not empty. And the porch was not mine yet, not legally, not until I understood what my father had been doing with it for 18 months. 3 boats were tied to the cleats, a bass boat, a pontoon, and a flat-bottomed John boat with a trolling motor. None of them were Cecil's. A man was hosing down the deck of the pontoon, stocky sunburned neck, work shirt tucked in. Can I help you? He climbed up from the dock and extended his hand. His grip was firm. Hutto, I rent the dock and the South Acre for boat storage. Rent from whom? Leroy Holbrook, Cecil's son. He took over the property after Cecil passed. Hutto wiped his hands on his work pants. I pay $1,800 a month. Cash. Been doing it 18 months now. I have receipts if you need them. I keep everything in a folder at home. 18 months. $32,400. Cash. My father had been collecting rent on a dead man's cabin that he told the entire family was sold to pay for medical bills. Mr. Hutto, Leroy does not own this property, I told him. Cecil never sold it. He never transferred it. The deed is in a safety deposit box at First Citizens Bank. I am Cecil's granddaughter, and I am the named beneficiary of his estate. Hutto's face changed slowly. Not shock. Something closer to the look a man gets when a piece of information he has been ignoring suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. He set the hose down on the dock boards. I have every receipt, he repeated carefully, every month. Cash. But I wrote the dates and amounts on the back of each one. He rubbed the back of his neck. There is something else you should know. Leroy was not always the one who came for the money. His son came out here twice. The younger one, Vince, dark hair, gray Tahoe. Vince collected rent once in July, once in September. He drove up, counted the cash on the hood of his truck, and left. Took about 4 minutes both times. Did not ask about the boats, did not ask about the dock, just counted and left. My brother, the one who laughed before I opened the box. The one who sat at the Thanksgiving table and watched Dad throw a watch across the cloth and smiled because he thought the watch was the last loose end and he thought it was worthless. Vince had been at this cabin. He had counted cash on the hood of his gray Tahoe. He knew the cabin existed. He knew Dad was collecting rent from a tenant who believed Leroy Holbrook owned the place. He was part of it. The laugh at the dinner table was not cruelty. It was relief. He thought the watch was the last thread and he thought nobody would ever pull it. I almost sat down on Cecil's porch right there and cried. Almost let the weight of it push me into the rocking chair and let the lake carry the sound of it across the water. But the watch was on my wrist and the second hand was ticking, and Cecil's letter was in my bag, and it said, "Do not let them tell you what you are worth." So I stood on the porch and I looked at the lake and I called Bess. "I need a locksmith out here by Friday," I told her, "and I need you to come with me." Tuesday evening. My phone rang at 8:47 p.m. Dad, his voice came through hot and fast. The voice of a man who has just learned that a door he locked has been opened by someone who was not supposed to have the key. "You opened that safety deposit box. The bank called the estate contact number. That box was not yours, Thea. Whatever is in there belongs to the family. All of it. The key was in the watch, Dad. The watch was mine. You threw it at me across a dinner table in front of my daughter. I did not throw it. I handed it to you. You slid it across the table between the cranberry sauce and the sweet potatoes and told me it matched my value. In front of Cleo. In front of Harris. In front of your own wife who did not say a word. Stop twisting what happened. The point is that safety deposit box was Cecil's. The contents are estate property, which means they belong to the whole family. You do not get to walk into a bank and take things that do not belong to you. Everything in that box has my name on it. The Vanguard account lists me as sole Todd beneficiary. The engraving inside the watch says for Thea. And the deed to the lake cabin is in Cecil's name, not yours. 3 seconds of silence. Then his voice dropped to a register I had not heard before. Not the confident patriarch, something thinner. What deed? The cabin, Dad, the one on Sinclair. The one you told us 5 years ago was sold to cover medical bills. It was never sold. The title is clean, no transfer recorded, no sale, no power of attorney. And Hutto says hello. The silence stretched. I could hear him breathing through his nose. Hard, fast, the breathing of a man whose lie has developed witnesses he did not plan for. "You do not know what you are talking about," he managed. Cecil was confused at the end. He did not understand what he was doing. He signed a Vanguard Todd form. He engraved my name inside a watch he wore for 40 years. He wrote me a 3-paragraph letter in his own handwriting explaining everything. He hid the key in the one object he knew you would dismiss. That does not sound confused. That sounds like the most deliberate thing he ever did. Thea, I am warning you. Do not do anything with that property until we have a family conversation about this. We had a family conversation on Thursday, Dad. You called me leftovers. You told my daughter her mother's business is a folding table at a church parking lot. You threw a $14,000 watch across the table to prove I was worthless. We are done having family conversations. I hung up. Wednesday morning. Mom called. Charlene Holbrook. The enabler. The woman who had sat at the Thanksgiving table and watched her husband throw a watch box across the table and call her granddaughter's understanding of the world a punchline about folding tables, and said nothing, not one word. Her voice was soft and careful, the voice she uses when she has been coached by Leroy on what to say and is delivering it in her own register so it sounds like concern instead of strategy. Thea, your father is very upset. He feels like you went behind his back with the bank and the property. He went behind everyone's back for 5 years. The cabin was never sold, Mom. Did you know? 3 seconds of quiet. Then your father handled your grandfather's affairs. I trusted him to manage things. That is not what I asked. Did you know the cabin was not sold? She exhaled. I knew the cabin still existed, but your father said he was managing it for the family. He said it was too much to deal with during Cecil's illness, and he would sort it out when things settled. He sorted it into his pocket, Mom. $1,800 a month from Hutto. 18 months. Cash. None of it reported. And Vince helped collect. Silence, longer this time. I could hear the clock in her kitchen. The one that has ticked in the same spot above the stove for 30 years. Maybe we should all sit down together, as a family, and talk about this. I am done sitting at tables where my daughter gets insulted and my inheritance gets stolen. I sat at your table last Thursday, and your husband called my business a garage sale and told Cleo her mother sorts through dead people's garbage while she was eating mashed potatoes 4 feet from him. I am done sitting, Mom. She did not respond. I hung up. I filed the Todd claim on the Vanguard account that afternoon. Form signed, notarized, submitted with Cecil's death certificate and the brokerage statement from the safety deposit box. $94,000. Transfer timeline, 30 business days. Friday, December 5th. The locksmith's white van was parked in the gravel at the lake cabin when I arrived at noon. Bess was already inside, walking the rooms, taking notes for a basic property condition report. The cabin smelled like pine and dust and the particular stillness of a house that has been closed for too long but was built by someone who intended it to last. Cecil's rocking chair was still on the porch. The cushion was faded. The wood was solid. The locksmith finished the front door by 12:40, the back door by 12:55. New deadbolts, new knob sets, 2 sets of keys. He was working on the dock padlock when I heard tires on the gravel. Dad's truck, Leroy behind the wheel, Vince in the passenger seat, and behind them, in his own sedan, Uncle Harris. Dad had brought Harris as a witness. He thought Harris would take his side because Harris was his brother, and that is what brothers do in the Holbrook family. You show up and you stand where you are told to stand. They walked across the gravel. Dad first. His jaw was set and his shoulders were squared, and he walked the way a man walks when he has practiced what he is going to say in the truck on the way over. This is my father's property, Leroy started. You have no right to change the locks. I was standing on the porch. The watch was on my wrist. The deed was in a clear sleeve on the porch railing. Bess was behind me in the doorway. Hutto was at the dock, watching. This is Cecil's property, I corrected, and I am the named beneficiary. You are not the owner, Thea. You are a beneficiary on a brokerage account. That does not give you the right to change locks and make decisions about a family property. The deed is right there. I nodded toward the clear sleeve, read it. Leroy picked it up. His eyes moved across the page. Vince stepped closer and read over his shoulder. Harris stood 3 feet back with his hands in his coat pockets. "This does not prove anything," Dad said, but his voice had thinned. Cecil was not in his right mind. "This deed is old. It is the only deed on file. There is no sale. There is no transfer. The title is clean. I ran it with the county." Harris stepped forward. He took the deed from Leroy's hand without asking. He read it slowly. He looked at Leroy. Then he looked at me. "You told me this place was sold 4 years ago, Leroy." Harris's voice was flat. "You told the whole family." Dad's jaw worked, but nothing came out. I kept my voice level. The voice I use when I am presenting an estate inventory to a family that does not want to hear what their mother's house is actually worth. The cabin was never sold. The dock has been rented 18 months. Grandpa engraved my name inside the watch you threw across the table. Leroy's face changed. The confidence left it the way heat leaves a room when a window breaks. His right hand clenched at his side. His left hand reached for the porch railing and gripped it until his knuckles went white. His neck went red first, then his ears, then his forehead. His jaw worked twice without producing a word. His breathing got fast and shallow, and his chest moved with it, and his shoulders dropped an inch. He took a step toward the front door. "I am going inside. This is my father's house, and I am his son. The locks are changed. The keys are mine. And this is not your father's house. It is mine." He turned to Harris. "Harris, are you going to stand there and let her do this?" She is a 36-year-old woman with a folding table business. She does not get to take Dad's cabin. Harris looked at Leroy for a long time, the look a man gives his brother when the ground between them has shifted and the shift is permanent. Then he looked at the deed. Then he looked at the dock where Hutto was standing with his arms crossed and his receipts in a folder on the pontoon seat. "Leroy, I told my wife you sold this place. I told the church. I told my own kids. You stood in my kitchen 2 years ago with a beer in your hand and told me the money went to Cecil's medical bills, and I believed you because you are my brother." Harris folded the deed and held it out to me. "I am not standing anywhere, Leroy. I am leaving." Harris walked to his sedan. He got in. He pulled down the gravel road without looking back. The dust settled behind his tires. Vince had not spoken a single word since arriving. He was standing 2 steps behind Leroy, with his hands deep in his jacket pockets and his face the color of old concrete. Hutto called from the dock. "Miss Holbrook, you want me to confirm the rental payments? I have the receipts right here, including the one your brother signed in July." Vince's mouth opened. No sound came out, just the jaw dropping and the eyes going wide and the body language of a man whose alibi just collapsed in front of 4 witnesses, including a dock tenant, with a folder full of receipts. Leroy looked at Vince. Vince looked at the ground. The locksmith walked over and held out the 2 key sets. I took them both. Beth stepped onto the porch behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. Our signal. The same one she used when I was 24, and I successfully appraised my first estate auction lot without help. Job done. Dad and Vince drove down the gravel road in the same truck they came in. Vince was in the passenger seat, staring through the windshield the way a man stares when he realizes the laughter at the Thanksgiving table was the beginning of the end and not the end itself. The financial consequences followed in the order that paperwork follows. The Vanguard Todd transfer completed in January, $94,000, moved from Cecil Raymond Holbrook's account to Thea Marie Holbrook. The branch manager processed it without questions. The funds settled into my account the way water settles into a basin, quietly and completely. The cabin's property tax bill arrived in December, $3,400 for the year. I paid it from the Vanguard account, establishing myself as the active property manager on the Baldwin County records. The tax receipt went into the fireproof box with the deed and the brokerage statement. Every document dated, every payment traceable, everything in my name. Hutto moved his boats within the week. He came to my shop on a Tuesday with a folder of receipts in a gallon Ziploc bag. 18 months of handwritten amounts on the backs of notebook pages. $32,400 total. He apologized 3 times. He offered to help with dock repairs at no charge. I thought he owned it, he kept saying. He talked like he owned it. I told him we would talk in the spring. I told him he was not the one who owed me an apology. December 10th. Dad walked into my shop. Holbrook Estate Services on Hancock Street. The bell above the door rang. He stood in the middle of a room full of estate sale inventory, surrounded by other people's belongings that I had priced and cataloged and prepared for sale, the exact work he had mocked at Thanksgiving. He had a typed piece of paper in his hand. I had a lawyer draw this up, he announced. Sell the cabin. Split the proceeds 50-50. You and me. No courts. No paperwork beyond the sale. Family should not go to court, Thea. This is a fair offer. I took the proposal. I read it. 1 page. No mention of the $94,000 Vanguard account. No mention of the $32,400 in rent he had collected. No mention of the $18,500 watch on my wrist that he had thrown across a dinner table. A 50-50 split on a $285,000 property that was already mine by deed and by Cecil's explicit written instruction. He was offering me half of something I owned entirely. I set the proposal on the counter next to the property appraisal I had commissioned. Bess was at the filing cabinet. She glanced at both documents. She read the appraisal figure aloud. $285,000. 4 acres. Lake frontage. Original structure in serviceable condition. I picked up the proposal, folded it in half, opened the filing cabinet drawer marked rejected offers, dropped it in, closed the drawer. The metal clicked shut. I did not say a word. Dad stood in my shop for 8 seconds. He looked at the filing cabinet. He looked at me. He looked at the watch on my wrist. Then he walked out. The bell rang once behind him. I sent a formal accounting of the collected rents to Dad via certified mail on December 19th. 3 pages on Holbrook Estate Services letterhead. 18 months of Hutto's receipts documented. $32,400 in unreported cash income. The letter included a line at the bottom. You may wish to consult a tax professional regarding unreported rental income on a property you do not own. The certified mail receipt came back signed in Leroy's handwriting. He did not respond for 6 days. On the 7th day, he called a CPA. The CPA's response made him sit down at the kitchen table for a long time. Uncle Harris stopped calling Leroy entirely. His wife Connie told Charlene at the Piggly Wiggly the following week in the cereal aisle, their carts facing each other. Harris says Leroy collected rent on Cecil's cabin for 18 months and lied about it. He says Leroy told him it was sold. He told the church. He told his own children. Connie paused. Harris does not want to hear from Leroy. Please do not call our house. Charlene did not respond. She looked at the cereal boxes on the shelf. She looked at the cart in front of her. Then she set her purse on the handle, changed her mind, put the purse back on her shoulder, and walked out of the store. She left the groceries in the cart in the middle of the cereal aisle. She drove home. She did not go back to that Piggly Wiggly for 3 weeks. Tamara unfollowed Thea on Instagram but screenshotted every photo Thea posted of the cabin, the porch, the dock, the lake through the pines, the rocking chair with the new green cushion. Vince had not spoken to anyone in the family since the porch. He had moved out of Tamara's house into a coworker's spare bedroom without explaining why. Tamara found the cabin screenshots on her own phone, looked at them for a while, deleted them one by one, and sat in her car in the Kroger parking lot for 15 minutes with the engine running before she drove home. If you have ever filed someone's lies in a drawer marked rejected and let the silence do the rest, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. 3 weeks after the lock change, Hutto called me. He told me what he saw. Leroy had driven past the cabin on a Tuesday afternoon. New lock on the front door, brass, catching the afternoon light. New padlock on the dock gate. My truck was not there. Nobody was home. But the porch was not empty. Cecil's rocking chair was still in its spot with the new green cushion I had ordered after finding the catalog page Cecil had circled 20 years ago, folded in a kitchen drawer. Leroy would have recognized the shade. He was the one who threw the old cushion away last spring when he was collecting Hutto's rent and pretending the cabin was his. Hutto told me Leroy parked at the end of the gravel road with the engine running. He sat there for 40 minutes. He did not get out. He did not drive up to the cabin. He did not knock on the door that would not open for him anymore. He sat at the end of the road and looked at what he had lost and what his father had chosen to protect from him, and then he turned around and drove home. Hutto watched the whole thing from his kitchen window across the cove. He said Leroy's windows were up and his headlights were off and the seat beside him was empty. Saturday morning, February 7th. The lake cabin porch. The sun comes through the pines at an angle that throws long shadows across the dock and turns the water copper and gold. The air smells like pine sap and lake mud and the particular quiet of a place that was built by a man who believed houses should outlast the people who live in them. Cecil's rocking chair sits in its spot. Cleo is in it. Her feet do not touch the floor. She rocks slowly with the rhythm of a 7-year-old who has found a chair that fits her even though it was built for someone 4 times her size. The green cushion is new. The wood is old and solid and warm in the morning light. The Omega Seamaster is on my wrist. Aldo serviced it last week. New gaskets. Cleaned movement. The gold case catches the sun. $18,500 on my wrist. My father threw it across a table to prove a point, and the point proved itself in the wrong direction. Bess Milligan is at the porch railing with a mug of coffee and a contractor's estimate for the cabin roof, $8,200. She is marking the estimate with a red pen, the same pen she uses to price estate sale lots, crossing out the items she thinks are overcharged and circling the ones she agrees with. She has been doing this for 40 years. She has never been wrong about a roof. She has never been wrong about a watch. She has never been wrong about the value of a thing that other people were too careless to examine. The deed is framed on the wall inside the cabin, next to a photo of Cecil on the dock with a fishing rod and the smile that reached his ears. The smile he saved for the mornings when the lake was still and the coffee was hot and nobody was asking him for anything. The Vanguard account statement is in a fireproof box in the bedroom closet. $94,000 transferred, cleared, mine. The property appraisal sits in a folder on the kitchen counter. $285,000. 4 acres. Lake frontage. Original structure. The cabin is mine. The watch is mine. The porch is mine. The lake through the pines is mine, and my father's wrist is bare because he never wore his father's watch. He never thought it was worth wearing. He never turned it over. He never lifted the back cover. He never looked for the thing Cecil hid in the only place he knew Leroy would never bother to check. Cleo reaches across the arm of the rocking chair and touches the face of the Omega with one finger. The glass is smooth. The second hand ticks. Was this really Grandpa's? Every day for 40 years. Why did Daddy Leroy call it junk? I look at the lake, at the dock, at the deed framed on the wall through the cabin window, at the chair my grandfather sat in every morning for the last 20 years of his life. Because he never turned it over. Cleo nods. She rocks the chair. The watch ticks on my wrist. The porch holds us both the way it held Cecil, steady and without complaint, built for the kind of weight that has nothing to do with pounds.